The first signs something was wrong came in the form of hushed voices from behind the study door. I wouldn't have noticed them at all if I hadn't been walking past with fresh flowers for the foyer, a Tuesday ritual I'd maintained since moving into Clayton Estate 5 years ago. My name is Freya, and until 6 months ago, I was living what I thought was a charmed life with my husband Emmett. Now I'm alone in this sprawling mansion, maintaining appearances while he's off finding himself with his yoga instructor in Bali. I paused outside the heavy oak door, my hand still gripping the crystal vase. The voices grew clearer. "She has to go, Wade. I won't have her here anymore, sullying our family name." My mother-in-law Mallory's voice dripped with contempt. "Draft the eviction papers immediately." The family lawyer's response was measured. "Mrs. Clayton, I must advise against hasty actions. Freya has contributed significantly to—" "I don't care what she's contributed. This is Clayton property, and she's no longer a Clayton, as far as I'm concerned." My fingers tightened around the vase. The orchids trembled slightly, dropping a single petal to the polished hardwood floor. "Actually," Wade continued, "her name is still on several legal documents. And let's not forget the substantial loan she's provided to—" "Enough!" Mallory's sharp tone cut through the air. "I want her gone by the end of the month. Make it happen." I backed away from the door, my heart pounding. 5 years of paying their debts, managing their properties, and keeping their precious family estate afloat. And this was my reward. The front door opened, and Faith, my sister-in-law, walked in. Her eyes widened when she saw my face. "Freya, what's wrong?" I pulled her into the nearby sitting room, setting down the vase before my shaking hands could drop it. "Your mother is trying to evict me." "What? She can't do that." Faith's voice rose in pitch. "Shh." I pressed a finger to my lips. "She's in the study with Wade right now, plotting my removal like I'm some kind of pest infestation." Faith grabbed my hands. "Listen to me. You've done more for this family than anyone. The loans you provided saved us from bankruptcy after Dad died. She's just—" "A manipulative witch," I supplied. A ghost of a smile crossed Faith's face. "I was going to say struggling with changes, but your description works too." The study door opened, and we both froze. Wade's footsteps echoed down the hallway, followed by Mallory's lighter tread. "Faith, is that you, darling?" Mallory called out. Faith squeezed my hands before responding. "Yes, Mother. Just catching up with Freya." The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as Mallory appeared in the doorway. Her steel-grey hair was perfectly coiffed, her pearl necklace gleaming. "Freya, dear, I didn't realize you were here." I met her gaze steadily. "I live here, Mallory, at least for now." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, well, about that. We should talk soon. Family matters to discuss." "Of course," I replied, my voice honey-sweet. "Should we discuss the Hamilton property loans? Or perhaps the art collection that mysteriously disappeared last spring?" Mallory's face paled slightly before she recovered. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean." "Faith, come along. We have that charity luncheon to attend." After they left, I sat alone in the sitting room, staring at the orchids I'd arranged so carefully. My phone buzzed. A text from Alan, my oldest friend, and the only person outside the family who knew the true extent of the Claytons' financial dealings. "Lunch tomorrow," his message read. "Got some interesting info about the foundation accounts." I typed back quickly. "Definitely. Need to talk. Mallory's making her move." Standing up, I walked to the antique desk in the corner and pulled out a leather-bound ledger, one of many I'd been keeping since I first noticed discrepancies in the family accounts. Mallory wanted me gone. Fine. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I knew where all the bodies were buried, and I had the receipts to prove it. The game was on, and I hadn't survived 5 years in this family by playing nice. I opened my laptop and began compiling files, a plan already forming in my mind. If Mallory wanted war, I'd give her one she'd never forget. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 4 times, its deep resonance echoing through the empty house. I had 2 weeks until the end of the month, 2 weeks to ensure my survival in a family that had forgotten the meaning of loyalty. Game on, Mallory, game on. Alan was already waiting at our usual corner table in Cafe Rustica when I arrived the next day. His laptop was open, and he had that focused look I knew too well from our college days. "You look like hell," he said as I slid into the seat across from him. "Thanks. That's exactly what every woman wants to hear." I ordered a double espresso when the waitress came by. "Tell me you found something good." He turned his laptop toward me. "Remember those charitable donations Mallory's been making? I traced them. They're going to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands." "Show me." We spent the next hour going through financial records, tracking suspicious transactions, and building what looked increasingly like a solid case of embezzlement. My coffee grew cold, forgotten. "This is good," I said, "but I need more. Something concrete that—" My phone buzzed. Emmett's face flashed on the screen. I hadn't heard from my husband in weeks. "Aren't you going to answer that?" Alan asked. I let it ring. "He's probably calling about the eviction. Mallory must have told him." The phone buzzed again, this time with a text. "We need to talk. I'm at the estate." "Shit." I gathered my things. "He's at the house. I have to go." Alan caught my arm as I stood. "Be careful, Freya. Remember, you hold more cards than they think." I found Emmett in the garden, sitting on the bench where we'd shared our first kiss 6 years ago. He looked tanned from his Bali adventure, but his eyes were troubled. "Mother told me what's happening," he said without preamble. "Did she tell you she's trying to throw me out of my home?" I kept my distance, standing with my arms crossed. "It's not your home, Freya. It's the family estate." "Really? And who paid off the mortgage when your father's debts came due? Who's been managing the properties, keeping this place afloat while you're off finding yourself?" He had the decency to look uncomfortable. "That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "Let's talk about fair, Emmett. Let's talk about how your mother has been siphoning money from the family foundation. Let's talk about the art collection she sold without documentation." "Those are serious accusations," he said, standing up. "Do you have proof?" I pulled out my phone and showed him some of the documents Alan and I had compiled. His face grew increasingly pale as he scrolled through them. "Mother wouldn't. She couldn't." "She did. And I have more. Much more." Faith appeared at the garden door. "I thought I heard voices." She looked between us. "Everything okay?" "Your brother's just learning some family history," I said. "Freya, please," Emmett said. "We can work something out." "The family name." "The family name?" I cut him off. "The only reason your precious family name isn't mud is because I've been covering up your mother's tracks for years. Out of loyalty, out of love." I turned to Faith. "Show him the Hamilton property papers." Faith hesitated, then pulled an envelope from her jacket. "I found these in Mother's study last week." She handed them to Emmett. "The loan documents Freya's talking about, with her signature, and Mother's creative bookkeeping." Emmett's hands shook as he read. "This can't be right. The numbers are exactly right," I finished. "Your mother borrowed against my personal assets without my knowledge, used the money to cover her gambling debts. Did you really think all those charity galas were legitimate?" He sank back onto the bench. "What do you want?" "I want to stay in my home. I want your mother to back off. And I want a seat on the foundation board." "Mother will never agree to that. Then I'll take everything I have to the authorities." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Think carefully, Emmett, about what that would mean for everyone. For you." Faith touched my arm. "I'll talk to Mother. Make her see reason." "You have until the end of the week," I said to Emmett. "After that, I stop protecting this family's secrets." I walked away, leaving them in the garden. My phone buzzed again, Alan checking in. I texted back quickly. "Phase 1 complete, they're rattled." His response came immediately. "Good. Don't let them see you sweat." I smiled grimly. They'd never see me sweat, but they would see me win. The war for Clayton Estate was just beginning, and I had years of ammunition ready to fire. The next morning, I was in the estate's library when Wade, the family lawyer, appeared in the doorway. His usual polished demeanor seemed slightly ruffled. "Freya, do you have a moment?" I gestured to the chair across from me. "Of course, Wade. Though I'm surprised you're here. I thought Mallory had you busy drafting eviction papers." He sat down heavily, loosening his tie. "About that, some concerning documents crossed my desk this morning. Documents suggesting irregular financial activities within the foundation." "Really?" I kept my voice neutral while pulling a file from my bag. "Documents like these?" His eyes widened as he scanned the papers. "Where did you get these?" "Let's just say I've been paying attention, very close attention." I leaned forward. "Tell me, Wade, did you know about the Hamilton property when you helped Mallory set up those offshore accounts?" He tugged at his collar. "My involvement was strictly professional." "Of course it was. Just like your involvement in the art collection sale was strictly professional." I slid another document across the table. "Though I notice your signature is conspicuously absent from these transfer papers." The door opened, and Victoria, my other sister-in-law, walked in. She stopped short when she saw us. "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt." "Actually, your timing is perfect," I said. Wade was just about to explain some interesting financial decisions. Victoria's eyes narrowed. She'd always been the most business-savvy of the family. "What kind of decisions?" Wade stood up abruptly. "I should go. This isn't—" "Sit down," Victoria commanded, closing the door behind her. "I want to hear this." Over the next hour, I laid out everything. The missing art, the fake charitable donations, the property loans. Victoria's expression grew darker with each revelation. "That explains the discrepancies I found in the Foundation's quarterly reports," she said finally. "I knew something was off, but Mother insisted I was mistaken." Wade cleared his throat. "These allegations are very serious." "They're not allegations," Victoria snapped. "They're facts. Facts that could destroy this family." She turned to me. "What's your play here, Freya?" "I want what's rightfully mine. And I want Mallory to face consequences for once in her life." The library door burst open. Faith rushed in, her face flushed. "Mother's called an emergency family meeting. Tomorrow night. Everyone has to attend." "How convenient," I said. "I assume this is about my eviction." "Actually," Faith said, "it's about the Foundation. She's announcing some changes to the board." Victoria laughed sharply. "Let me guess. She's removing the last few people who might question her authority." Wade stood up again, gathering his papers with trembling hands. "I should prepare some documents for the meeting." "Prepare whatever you want," I called after him as he hurried out. "But remember, I have copies of everything." After he left, Victoria sat in his vacated chair. "You've been planning this for a while, haven't you?" "Since the day Emmett left. I knew Mallory would try something eventually." I looked at both sisters-in-law. "The question is, where do you two stand?" Faith and Victoria exchanged glances. It was Victoria who spoke first. "I love my mother, but what she's done, it's criminal and stupid. She's risking everything our father built." "I found more documents," Faith added quietly. "In the study, records of gambling debts, loans from some very dangerous people. This goes deeper than we thought." My phone buzzed, a message from Alan. "Got the forensic accountant's report. It's worse than we suspected. Call me ASAP. "Tomorrow night," I said, standing up. "Everything comes out. Are you with me?" Victoria nodded firmly. "Someone needs to stop her, for the family's sake." Faith hesitated, then squared her shoulders. "For the family." As they left, I called Alan. "Tell me everything about that report." "You better sit down for this," he said. "Remember that charity in Monaco? Turns out it's not just a front for gambling debts. Mallory's been using it to launder money for some very unsavory characters." I sank back into my chair, staring at the family portrait hanging above the fireplace. Mallory stood front and center, her perfect smile hiding a web of lies that went back years. "Send me everything," I said. "Tomorrow night the truth comes out. All of it." "Be careful," Alan warned. "Cornered animals are the most dangerous." I ended the call and walked to the window, watching the sunset over the estate grounds. Tomorrow would change everything. I just hoped the family could survive the fallout. The evening of the family meeting arrived, with a storm brewing both outside and in. Thunder rolled as I entered the estate's main dining room, where Mallory had insisted we gather. The massive oak table that had witnessed countless family dinners now felt like a battlefield. Victoria was already there, typing furiously on her tablet. "The forensic accountant sent over the final numbers," she whispered as I sat down. "It's staggering." Faith slipped in next, followed by Wade, who couldn't quite meet my eyes. Emmett arrived last, looking uncomfortable in a suit that still carried creases from his suitcase. Mallory swept in like a queen entering her court, pearls gleaming in the chandelier light. "Thank you all for coming. We have important matters to discuss regarding the Foundation's future." "And my eviction," I interrupted, my voice carrying across the table. "That's a private matter," she said dismissively. "Nothing about this family is private anymore, Mallory." I placed a thick folder on the table. "Shall we discuss the Monaco transactions?" The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Mother," Victoria said, turning her tablet around. "These are the Foundation's real numbers. Care to explain the discrepancies?" Thunder crashed outside as Mallory's composure cracked. "You've been going through private documents?" "Someone had to," Faith said quietly. "The Foundation is bleeding money." "And not just to gambling debts," I added. "Though those are bad enough." Emmett leaned forward. "What gambling debts?" "Show them, Wade," I commanded. "Show them the papers you've been hiding." Wade's hands shook as he opened his briefcase. "Mrs. Mallory, I tried to warn you about the risks." "Don't you dare," Mallory hissed. "I pay you to protect this family's interests." "By helping you launder money?" Victoria's voice was ice cold. "By covering up theft?" Lightning flashed, illuminating the rage on Mallory's face. "Everything I did was for this family. To maintain our position, our legacy." "By stealing from me?" I stood up, planting my hands on the table. "By using my money to cover your tracks." "You?" Mallory laughed bitterly. "You're nothing. An outsider who seduced my son. Enough." Emmett's shout silenced the room. "Mother, is it true? Did you steal from Freya?" "Of course not. I merely reallocated some resources." $3 million worth of resources, Victoria said, reading from her tablet. "Plus the art collection, the Hamilton property, and God knows what else." Faith pulled out the documents she'd found. "The gambling debts go back 5 years, Mother. Why didn't you tell us?" "Because she was too busy covering them up," I said. "Using Foundation money to pay off loan sharks, creating fake charities to hide the transactions. It's all here," Wade added, spreading papers across the table. "Every transaction, every cover-up." Mallory's face contorted. "You ungrateful little—" "Choose your next words carefully," I cut in. "Because right now, you have 2 options. Either you step down from the Foundation board voluntarily and cancel my eviction, or everything goes to the authorities." "You wouldn't dare." I pulled out my phone. "Try me. I have the district attorney on speed dial." "Mother," Emmett said softly, "what have you done?" Mallory's shoulders sagged, her carefully maintained facade crumbling. "I was protecting our way of life, the estate, the family name." "By committing fraud?" Victoria stood up. "By risking everything Father built?" "I move that we vote on new Foundation leadership," Faith said firmly. "Right now." "I second that," Victoria added. Mallory looked around the table, finding no allies. Even Wade avoided her gaze. "Fine," she spat. "Vote. But remember who made this family what it is." "Oh, we remember," I said, pulling out one final document. "That's why I've already drafted the new board structure, with me as chair." The storm outside reached its peak as Mallory realized she'd lost. Her perfect world was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "Sign," I said, sliding the paper toward her, "or I make the call." Her signature was shaky but legible. As soon as she finished, she stood and walked out, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. The silence that followed was broken only by the fading thunder. What happens now? Emmett asked. I gathered the documents, my hands steady. Now we clean up her mess. Together, as a family. The storm was passing, but its effects would be felt for a long time to come. I'd won the battle, but the war for the soul of this family was far from over. The morning after the confrontation, I found Mallory in the conservatory, staring at the orchids I'd planted last spring. She looked smaller somehow, deflated without her usual armor of perfectionism. Come to gloat? She asked without turning around. No, I came to discuss the Foundation's recovery plan. I set my laptop on the glass table. Victoria's been up all night running numbers. Victoria always was too clever for her own good. Mallory finally faced me. Just like you. The door opened and Victoria walked in, followed by Faith and Emmett. This wasn't a planned meeting, but somehow we all knew where to find each other. The accountants need answers, Mother, Victoria said, her voice tight. About the Monaco accounts. Mallory sank into a wicker chair. What do you want to know? Everything, Emmett said, starting with why. Your father's death left us vulnerable. The estate was mortgaged to the hilt. I started gambling, thinking I could fix it quickly. She laughed bitterly. One bad decision led to another. And the loan sharks? Faith asked. They offered quick cash. No questions asked. Mallory's hands trembled. Until they started asking questions. I opened my laptop. They're still asking questions. I got this email an hour ago. I turned the screen toward them, showing a threatening message demanding payment. Jesus, Mother, Emmett breathed. These people are dangerous. You think I don't know that? Mallory snapped. Why do you think I've been so desperate? Victoria pulled up the Foundation's accounts on her tablet. We can cover the legitimate debts, but these underground loans, they're not even legal. Neither is what you did to cover them up, I pointed out. Mallory's facade cracked completely. I was terrified. They threatened to expose everything, to hurt the family. I couldn't let that happen. So you decided to hurt me instead? I asked quietly. You were convenient, an outsider, someone I could blame if everything fell apart. Faith stood up abruptly. That's horrible, Mother. Freya's been nothing but loyal to this family. More loyal than you deserved, Emmett added, surprising me. A knock at the conservatory door made us all jump. Wade entered, looking grave. The police are here, he announced. They have questions about the Foundation's accounts. Mallory went pale. You called them? No, I said, standing up. But someone did. Probably one of the Foundation's board members who saw the new financial reports. What do we do? Faith asked. I looked at Mallory, seeing real fear in her eyes for the first time. That depends on your mother. Are you ready to tell the truth? The truth will destroy us, she whispered. No, Victoria said firmly. Lies are destroying us. The truth might save us. Emmett moved to stand beside me. Freya, you know the Foundation's accounts better than anyone. Can you help? I can try to explain the discrepancies, make it look like accounting errors rather than deliberate fraud. I turned to Mallory. But you'll have to step down completely. No more control, no more schemes. And the loan sharks? She asked. I have a friend in the FBI's financial crimes unit, I said. If you cooperate, they might be able to help. Wade cleared his throat. The police are waiting. Mallory stood shakily. I never thought it would come to this. None of us did, Faith said, taking her mother's arm. But we're still family. Are we? Mallory looked at me. After everything I've done? That's up to you, I replied. Start telling the truth and we'll see. Victoria gathered her tablet and stood. I'll handle the police. Mother, you need to decide right now. Are you with us or against us? The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Finally, Mallory squared her shoulders. I'll tell them everything, she said quietly. God help me. As we walked toward the main hall where the police waited, Emmett caught my arm. Thank you, he said softly, for not destroying her completely. You could have. That's not who I am, I replied, despite what your mother thinks. Faith joined us. The Foundation can survive this. We can survive this. Together. Ahead of us, Mallory walked with Victoria, already discussing how to present the financial records. She looked older, but somehow more real than I'd ever seen her. "Ready?" I asked as we reached the hall doors. Mallory took a deep breath. "No, but it's time." As we entered the hall, I realized this wasn't the ending I'd expected when I started gathering evidence against Mallory. It wasn't revenge I was feeling, but something closer to resolution. The truth was finally coming out, and maybe that was better than any revenge could be. The healing could begin, but first we had to face the consequences of years of deception. Together, as a family, however broken and imperfect we might be. 3 days after Mallory's confession, the estate buzzed with activity. FBI agents combed through financial records, while forensic accountants set up camp in the library. I was reviewing documents with Alan when Victoria burst in. "They found something," she said, waving a folder. "In the old groundskeeper's cottage." Alan leaned forward. "What kind of something?" "Cash, lots of it, and documents linking Mother to some very prominent people who've been using the foundation to hide money." I grabbed my phone. "I'll call Agent Roberts." "Already here," a voice said from the doorway. The FBI agent entered, looking grim. "Ladies, we need to talk about witness protection." "That bad?" Alan asked. "Worse." Roberts sat down heavily. "Some of the names in those documents, let's just say they don't take kindly to exposure." The door burst open again as Emmett rushed in. "Mother's missing." "What?" I stood up so fast my chair toppled. "When?" "Faith went to check on her this morning. Her room was empty, car's gone." Victoria swore under her breath. "She'll run straight to them. Try to make a deal." "Or they already have her," Roberts said, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling it in." I grabbed my keys. "I know where she might be." "You're not going anywhere," Alan protested. "It's too dangerous." "The lake house," Emmett said suddenly. "That's where you think she is?" I nodded. "It's where she always went when things got tough. Remember after your father died?" Roberts was already mobilizing his team, speaking rapidly into his phone. "Nobody moves until we have backup." "There's no time," I insisted. "If she's making deals with these people." "Then she's already made them," Victoria cut in. "We go in smart or we don't go in at all." 2 hours later, we pulled up to the lake house in an unmarked FBI vehicle. The gravel driveway was empty except for Mallory's Mercedes. "Movement inside," Roberts murmured into his radio. "Second floor window." "Let me go in," I said. "She'll talk to me." "Absolutely not," Emmett protested. "She's right," Roberts said. "We need her to come quietly. Mrs. Clayton trusts no one right now, but Freya might have a chance." I stepped out of the car, heart pounding. The lake house looked exactly as it had during happier times, when we'd spent summers here as a family. "Mallory?" I called out as I approached the front door. "It's Freya. I'm alone." The door opened slowly. Mallory stood there, looking haunted. "You shouldn't have come." "Neither should you." I stepped inside. "Running makes you look guilty." "I am guilty." She moved to the living room window, staring out at the lake. "More than you know." "Then tell me, tell all of us. We can still fix this." She turned, tears in her eyes. "Fix it? Do you know what these people will do when they realize I've exposed them? The FBI can protect you, protect all of us. Like they protected Judge Morrison." She laughed bitterly. "He was going to expose everything 3 years ago. Had a fatal heart attack the next day." I felt cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I made deals with devils, Freya, and now they're calling in their markers." A floorboard creaked upstairs. I froze. "Mallory, are you alone here?" Her face crumpled. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. They said they'd hurt the children." "FBI, nobody move." Roberts's voice boomed as agents burst through every entrance. Everything happened in a blur. 2 men tried to escape through the back, but were quickly caught. Mallory collapsed, sobbing, as Victoria and Faith rushed in. "Clear," Roberts called out. "Subjects in custody." Emmett appeared at my side. "You okay?" I nodded. watching as agents led away the men who'd been hiding upstairs. "Who are they?" "Enforcers," Roberts said grimly. "Sent to silence her. You got here just in time." Mallory looked up from where she sat, surrounded by her children. "I was trying to protect everyone." "By getting yourself killed?" Victoria demanded. "By finishing what I started," Mallory whispered. "Making it right." I knelt beside her. "This isn't the way. Help the FBI. Tell them everything. Let us protect you the right way." She reached for my hand, surprising me. "Why do you care, after everything I did to you?" "Because that's what family does," I said simply. "We protect each other, the right way." As agents began processing the scene, I watched Mallory being comforted by her children. The truth was finally coming out, but at what cost? And what other secrets still lurked beneath the surface of our carefully constructed world? The lake sparkled outside, deceptively peaceful, just like our family had been, until all the lies began to unravel. The next week passed in a whirlwind of federal agents, depositions, and revelations. I sat in the estate's study, surrounded by boxes of evidence, when Wade arrived looking ashen. "They're arresting Judge Morrison's widow," he announced. "She just confessed to helping cover up his murder." Victoria looked up from her laptop. "Mother's testimony?" "Broke the whole thing wide open." Wade loosened his tie. "The FBI's calling it the biggest financial corruption case in state history." Faith burst in, waving her phone. "Turn on the news, now." I grabbed the remote, and the wall-mounted TV flickered to life. The headline scrolled across the bottom: "Prominent socialite exposes nationwide money laundering scheme." "Mallory's going public," I breathed. The screen showed her leaving the federal building, surrounded by agents. She looked smaller than ever, but held her head high. "Mother's testimony has implicated 3 senators and a dozen corporate executives," Faith said. "The FBI is saying more arrests are coming." Emmett appeared in the doorway. "They're moving her to a safe house tonight. She wants to see all of us first." The safe house turned out to be a modest ranch-style home on the outskirts of town. Agent Roberts met us at the door. 20 minutes, he said firmly. "We need to get her settled before dark." Mallory sat at a kitchen table that had seen better days, a far cry from the estate's antique furniture. She managed a weak smile as we entered. "My children," she said softly. "All of you. Even you, Freya." "How are you holding up?" Victoria asked, sitting beside her. "Better than I deserve." Mallory's hands shook as she reached for her water glass. "The prosecutor says my cooperation will count for something." "What happens now?" Faith perched on the counter, looking worried. "Now the real storm begins." Mallory met my eyes. "The foundation is being restructured," I finished. "Victoria and I spent all week with the forensic accountants. We can save it." "After everything I did?" "The foundation does good work," I said firmly. "Real good work, when it's not being used as a cover. We're not letting it die because of a few bad actors." "A few?" Emmett scoffed. "Mother, the list of people you've implicated—" "Had to be done," she cut him off. "I've spent years protecting the wrong people. It's time to protect the right ones." A knock at the door made us all jump. Robert stepped in. "Time's up. We need to move." Mallory stood, straightening her shoulders. "Victoria, Faith, take care of each other. Emmett." She paused. "Make things right with your wife. She's stronger than all of us." "What about you?" Faith asked, tears in her eyes. "I'll be fine. The FBI says it won't take long to round up the main players. Then maybe—" She glanced around the shabby kitchen. "Maybe I'll learn to live a simpler life." "Mrs. Clayton," Roberts pressed, "we need to go." "Wait," I said, stepping forward. "Mallory, I need to know, why did you finally decide to tell the truth?" She smiled sadly. "Because you showed me what real strength looks like, not in threats or schemes, but in standing up for what's right." She touched my cheek gently. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." As Roberts led her away, we stood in silence. The sound of car doors slamming, engine starting, and then nothing. The press will be all over this, Victoria said finally. We need a strategy. Already handled, Wade spoke up from the corner. The Foundation's PR team is preparing a statement about internal reforms and cooperation with authorities. My phone buzzed, Alan texting updates about the latest arrests. The web of corruption Mallory had exposed was vast, reaching into boardrooms and political offices across the country. She did it, Faith whispered. She actually did it. She chose family over fear, I said, finally. Emmett touched my arm. About what she said, about making things right. Not now, I cut him off. We have work to do. Victoria pulled out her tablet. The Foundation board meets tomorrow. We need to be ready. As we left the safe house, I looked back one last time. Somewhere out there, Mallory was starting a new chapter, one of truth and consequences. And here we were, picking up the pieces, rebuilding what was broken. The estate would survive. The Foundation would survive. And maybe, just maybe, our family would come out stronger for having faced the truth at last. Ready? Faith asked as we reached our cars. I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility. Ready. The sun was setting as we drove away, casting long shadows across the road. Behind us lay secrets and lies. Ahead, the hard work of redemption. But at least now we were facing it together. The autumn air was crisp as I stood in the estate's garden, watching the Foundation's new youth centre being dedicated. Where there had once been only manicured lawns, now stood a modern building filled with promise and purpose. Quite a turnout, Alan said, joining me with 2 cups of coffee. The press seems impressed. They should be. Victoria's been working miracles with the restructuring. Faith approached, beaming. The first scholarship recipients are here. Want to meet them? We walked over to a group of teenagers, their eyes bright with possibility. These were the kids the Foundation was meant to help all along, not the corrupt officials who'd used it as their personal piggy bank. My mother would have loved this, Faith said softly. The real her, I mean, before everything went wrong. The latest letter from Mallory had arrived yesterday. She was still in witness protection, but her testimony had led to over 30 arrests. The corruption ring was falling like dominoes. Victoria was at the podium now, addressing the crowd. Today marks a new chapter for our Foundation, one built on transparency, accountability, and genuine service to our community. I felt a presence beside me and turned to find Emmett. We hadn't spoken much since signing the divorce papers, but there was a peace between us now. You did it, he said quietly. You saved everything. We did it, I corrected, all of us. Mrs. Harrison, a young intern approached. The board members are gathering for the ribbon cutting. I smiled at the use of my maiden name. It felt right, like coming home to myself. Coming, I said, then turned back to Emmett. Will you stay for the ceremony? He shook his head. I'm heading back to Bali next week, but this time to teach at a local school, not to hide. Good, I said, meaning it. That suits you better than banking ever did. The ribbon cutting was a blur of cameras and applause. Victoria and Faith flanked me as we officially opened the youth centre's doors. Wade stood in the crowd, now serving as our compliance officer, his own path to redemption. Afterward, as the crowd mingled and toured the facility, Agent Roberts made an unexpected appearance. Thought you'd want to know, he said, pulling me aside. The last of the conspirators was arrested this morning. It's really over. How's Mallory doing? Faith asked, joining us. Adjusting. She's thinking about writing a book. Robert smiled slightly. Your mother's quite a storyteller when she's telling the truth. Victoria appeared with a tablet. Speaking of truth, look at these applications. We've had over 200 requests for our new mentorship program. The Foundation's finally doing what it was meant to do, I said, watching the teenagers explore their new space. Making a real difference. Thanks to you, Faith squeezed my hand. You could have burned it all down. Instead, you helped us rebuild. Family doesn't burn family, I said simply, even when they deserve it. The afternoon wound down, as the sun painted the estate's windows golden. I found myself back in the garden, this time joined by Victoria and Faith. The board wants to discuss expanding, Victoria said, opening centres in other cities. Let's do it right this time, Faith added. No shortcuts, no secrets. I looked at the estate behind us, then at the new youth centre before us. The contrast was striking. Old money versus new purpose. Both could coexist, I realised, when guided by the right principles. You know, I said, your mother once told me I'd never understand what it meant to be part of this family. And now, Faith asked, now I think I understand better than anyone. Family isn't about protecting secrets. It's about protecting each other's best selves. Victoria raised her coffee cup. To best selves, then. And new beginnings. And second chances, Faith added. I lifted my own cup, watching the sunset paint everything in shades of possibility. The estate had transformed from a fortress of secrets into a beacon of hope. Not just for the kids we'd help, but for all of us who'd found our way through the darkness. To second chances, I agreed. And to the truth setting us free. As if on cue, a group of teenagers burst out of the youth centre, laughing and talking about their plans for the space. Their energy, their hope, their future. This was what redemption looked like. The garden had never felt more alive, more purposeful. And neither had I. This was how healing happened, not in grand gestures or dramatic revelations, but in quiet moments of choosing right over easy, truth over comfort, growth over stagnation. The estate would always carry its history, but now it carried something else too, promise,